Somewhere in this country right now, there is a small farm, probably a lot like yours, where the chickens have not been fed commercial feed in over 2 years. Not because the owner gave up, not because they found some shortcut or supplement trick from the internet, but because they built a living food system right on their property, a system that grows protein and calories faster than their birds can eat it, a system that costs almost nothing to run. And once it was in place, the feed bags stopped coming. Now, I want to be honest with you from the start. Eliminating your feed bill entirely is not a weekend project. It is a system made of several parts that work together. And if you are missing even one piece of it, the whole thing underperforms. By the end of this video, you will know every part of that system. You will know the science behind why it works, and you will have a clear picture of how to begin building it on your land, whether you have half an acre or 5. Stay with me because we are also going to talk about something most homesteading channels skip completely: the psychology of feed dependency. Why most small flock owners keep buying bags they cannot afford, and what it actually takes to stop. Let us look at what chicken feed actually costs, not just at the register, but over a full year. The average small flock owner in the United States spends between $400 and $700 per year on commercial poultry feed for a flock of 15 to 25 birds. That number has climbed significantly since 2020. Commodity grain prices, corn and soybean meal, which form the base of virtually every commercial poultry feed, have experienced repeated price spikes tied to energy costs, transportation disruptions, and global supply pressures. It is documented in Small Flock Production Guide that feed represents anywhere from 60 to 75% of the total operating cost on a small poultry operation, which means if you are working to make your small farm financially sustainable, feed is the single largest lever you have. Reduce it, and everything else breathes easier. But here is what most people do not realize. The birds on your land do not actually need a bag of processed grain to thrive. What they need is protein, amino acids, energy, moisture, micronutrients. And every single one of those things can be grown right where you are standing. The 4 systems we are covering today: fodder sprouting, duckweed cultivation, Azolla, and fermented grain, each target a different piece of that nutritional puzzle. Stack them together, and the feed bag becomes something you only reach for in an emergency. Before we get into the how, I want to spend just a few minutes on the why, because understanding why you keep buying feed, even when you know it is expensive, is the key to actually stopping. There is a phrase used in sustainable agriculture circles: purchased input dependency. It describes what happens when a farm becomes structurally reliant on buying things from outside in order to function at all. Commercial chicken feed was designed to create exactly that dependency. It is convenient, it is consistent, and every time you pour a scoop and the birds rush over and eat enthusiastically, you get a small emotional reward, a sense that you have done the right thing. But that convenience comes with a cost most of us have never fully calculated. The primary barrier to feed reduction is not knowledge. It is habit and perceived risk. Small flock owners worry that switching away from commercial feed would result in poor performance, weight loss in their birds, or reduced egg production. And that fear is understandable. These are living animals in your care. You do not want to experiment at their expense. This is why every system we cover today is practical, tested, and backed by documented research. We are not experimenting. We are following paths that I have walked, thousands of small farms have already walked, and that university extension programs, ETRA, and international agricultural development agencies have studied and published findings on. The frugal homesteader mindset, the one that looks at a monthly feed bill and says, there has to be a better way, is not just about saving money. It is about building a farm that does not fall apart when prices spike, when supply chains fail, or when life gets complicated. That resilience starts with your first tray of fodder. So let us talk about that now. Fodder sprouting is the practice of germinating grain, typically barley, wheat, or oats, and feeding the resulting green plant, roots and all, to your chickens. It sounds simple, and it is. But what happens to that grain during the sprouting process is genuinely remarkable. Here is the science. A dry grain of barley is mostly starch. When you introduce water and allow germination to begin, enzymatic activity inside the seed starts breaking that starch down into more bioavailable forms. Phytic acid, an anti-nutrient that blocks mineral absorption, is significantly reduced, and the protein content of the living plant, measured as a percentage of dry matter, increases substantially. Sprouted barley fodder typically tests between 13 and 17% crude protein, comparable to many commercial layer feeds. More importantly, because the plant is living and moist, chickens consume it readily, and it contributes meaningfully to their daily fluid intake, which supports egg quality. Now let us talk about the math that makes this system powerful. 1 pound of dry barley grain, when sprouted for 7 days, yields approximately 6 to 8 pounds of fresh fodder. That is not a typo. The water uptake and plant growth multiply the volume dramatically, and the cost per pound of dry barley, purchased in bulk, is a fraction of the cost per pound of commercial layer pellets. Building your fodder system. The basic setup requires very little. Shallow trays, the kind used for seed starting or baking, work perfectly. You need enough trays to run a rolling cycle. 1 tray harvested each day, 1 tray started fresh each day, and 5 trays at various stages in between. For a flock of 20 birds, most producers find that 2 square feet of fodder tray space per day is sufficient as a supplement. If you are aiming to replace feed more aggressively, scale that up to 4 to 6 square feet per day. The process: soak your grain for 8 to 12 hours, drain, then spread thinly across your trays, roughly a 1/4 inch deep. Keep trays in a location with indirect light and good air circulation. By day 7, you have a dense, root-bound mat of green barley grass, ready to be lifted out whole and tossed to your birds. If you want to go deeper on fodder sprouting, the exact tray setup, the rinsing schedule, and how to troubleshoot mold, I have a dedicated video that walks through the entire system from start to finish. The link is in the description below. If you are already running a fodder system and have tips that work on your property or questions about getting started, drop them in the comments below. This community learns best from each other's real-world experience. Fodder gets us a long way toward our goal, but it alone will not eliminate your feed bill. For that, we need to add water. Duckweed is a floating aquatic plant so small that most people walk past it without noticing. It grows on the surface of still or slow-moving water. A single plant is the size of a match head, but together a colony of duckweed can double its mass every 24 to 48 hours under good conditions. That is the documented growth rate, making duckweed one of the fastest growing plants on the planet. Duckweed contains between 25 and 45% crude protein on a dry matter basis. To put that in perspective, soybean meal, the primary protein source in commercial poultry feed, typically tests at 44 to 48% crude protein. Duckweed, grown in a backyard tub at essentially zero cost, is approaching that same nutritional territory. Research published by the International Journal of Poultry Science found that laying hens-fed diets incorporating duckweed showed no significant decrease in egg production or egg quality compared to control groups on commercial feed, and in some trials showed improved yolk color, which is a marker of carotenoid intake. Setting up a duckweed system. You may not need a pond. A 100-gallon stock tank, a plastic storage tub, or even a series of shallow containers will work well. What duckweed needs: still or very slow-moving water, warm temperatures between 60 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and nutrients in the water. That last point is important, and it is where your chicken operation becomes self-sustaining in a very elegant way. Diluted chicken manure at very low concentrations is an ideal duckweed fertilizer. You are essentially feeding your waste stream back into a protein factory. University cooperative extension programs in the southeastern United States have documented this closed-loop system operating on small farms with excellent results. Start your duckweed colony with a small initial culture, available inexpensively from aquatic plant suppliers, or sometimes free from a neighbor with a farm pond. Cover approximately 1/3 of your tank's surface initially to allow rapid expansion. Harvest by skimming 1/3 of the surface growth daily, leaving the remaining 2/3 to regenerate. Do not harvest more than 1/3 per day. That is the regeneration threshold. Take too much and you collapse the colony. If you are not subscribed yet, now is a good time to do that. We have more videos on low-cost livestock nutrition coming, and this is the kind of content that gets buried by the algorithm if you are not subscribed. If duckweed is the workhorse of your water-based feed system, Azolla is the specialist. Azolla is an aquatic fern, tiny, lightweight, and remarkable for one very specific reason. It lives in a symbiotic relationship with a cyanobacterium called Anabaena azollae, which fixes atmospheric nitrogen directly into the plant. What that means practically, Azolla fertilizes itself. It does not need manure, tea, or added nutrients to grow. It pulls nitrogen from the air and uses it to build protein in its own tissue, protein that your chickens then consume. It is documented that Azolla's crude protein content is at 25 to 35% on a dry matter basis, along with a meaningful complement of essential amino acids, beta-carotene, and B vitamins, including B12, which is otherwise rare in plant-based feed sources. Multiple field studies from the Philippines and India, where Azolla has been used as poultry and aquaculture feed for decades, found that Azolla can replace 20 to 25% of commercial feed intake in laying hens without affecting production. Growing Azolla. The system is similar to duckweed in structure, but slightly more forgiving in some ways. Azolla grows in shallow water. 2 to 4 inches deep is ideal. It prefers partial shade. Full sun in hot climates can cause it to turn red and slow its growth. It tolerates a wide temperature range and spreads rapidly across the water surface. To inoculate a new bed, add a small starter portion of live Azolla, roughly a handful per square foot of water surface. Within 2 to 3 weeks under good conditions, the bed will be fully covered. The management advantage of Azolla over duckweed is its lower nutrient input requirement. If you're in a location where managing a fertilized water system is complicated, Azolla will outperform duckweed with less maintenance effort. Run both systems side by side, and you have a water-based protein production operation that runs almost entirely on sunlight, air, and rainwater. Both duckweed and Azolla have their own full videos on this channel. Those links are also in the description. If you have been watching this channel, you may have already seen our video on fermented feed, and specifically how 1 bucket of fermented grain can reduce your feed costs by up to 30% on its own. If you have not seen that video yet, I will link it at the end of this one. But let me give you the key principles here, because fermentation is the 4th leg of this system, and it transforms whatever grain you are still purchasing into something significantly more valuable. Lactofermentation, the same biological process that makes yogurt, sauerkraut, and sourdough, occurs naturally when grain is submerged in water for 24 to 72 hours. The naturally present lactobacillus bacteria in the environment begin consuming simple sugars in the grain and producing lactic acid as a byproduct. Fermented grain significantly reduces phytic acid content, the same anti-nutrient we discussed in the fodder section, which in turn improves the bird's ability to absorb phosphorus, calcium, zinc, and manganese from their feed, all of which matter for bone density, shell quality, and immune function. The second benefit is volumetric expansion. 1 pound of dry grain, when properly fermented, yields approximately 1.5 to 1.8 pounds of wet fermented feed by weight. Because the feed is denser and more satisfying per bite, and because the fermentation products support gut health directly, birds eat less of it per day to meet their nutritional needs. That is the mechanism behind the 30% feed reduction figure. The birds are simply more efficiently fed. How fermentation connects to the larger system. When you are also running fodder, duckweed, and Azolla alongside fermented grain, each system reinforcing the others, you are no longer supplementing commercial feed. You have built a nutritional foundation that commercial feed is supplementing, if you choose to use it at all. That shift in framing matters. It is the difference between a farm that is vulnerable to feed price spikes and one that barely notices them. Let us bring everything together. The goal is not to run 4 systems separately and hope they add up. The goal is to design them as a single integrated rotation that covers your flock's nutritional needs across seasons. Here is a simple framework. Fodder sprouting runs year-round indoors. It is your anchor, the system that keeps working even in winter when the water-based systems slow down or go dormant. It provides green matter, bioavailable protein, and digestive enzymes regardless of weather. Duckweed runs from late spring through early fall in most temperate climates. In warm regions, it can run nearly year-round with minimal management. It is your high-protein, warm-season workhorse. Azolla overlaps with duckweed seasonally and extends the season slightly on either end, being somewhat more cold-tolerant. Think of it as your shoulder-season protein bridge. Fermented grain anchors the grain portion of the diet throughout the year. Whatever grain you are still purchasing, whether as a small supplement or as your last remaining purchased input, fermenting it ensures you are getting maximum nutritional value and minimum waste from every pound. For a flock of 20 birds, a full 4-system stack, run at moderate scale, is documented to reduce commercial feed dependency to between 0 and 20% of the flock's total intake, Depending on season and management quality, that is a feed bill that goes from $500 or $600 a year to under $100. Some producers eliminate purchased feed entirely during the warm months and use only a small amount of fermented grain through winter. That is a realistic, achievable outcome on a property as small as half an acre. The key is starting. You do not need to build all 4 systems at once. Start with fermentation. It costs almost nothing and begins immediately. Add fodder sprouting next, then a duckweed tank when the weather allows. Azolla follows naturally once you have a water system in place. Each step reduces your dependency. Each step builds your confidence, and each step makes your farm a little more resilient than it was before. The farmers who have stopped buying commercial chicken feed did not do it because they had special land or unusual resources or a background in agriculture. They did it because they stopped accepting the feed store as a permanent fixture in their budget and started looking at their land differently. Every square foot of still water on your property is a potential duckweed or azolla bed. Every shelf in a cool corner of your barn or garage is a potential fodder rack. Every bucket with a lid is a potential fermentation vessel. The inputs for this entire system are grain purchased in bulk, water, sunlight, and time. That is it. You do not have to move fast. Small, purposeful farming is not about doing everything at once. It is about doing the right things consistently and building systems that work while you are doing something else. If this video gave you something useful, the most helpful thing you can do is share it with one person who is still paying full price for commercial feed. Not because of any algorithm, but because that information might genuinely change how they manage their farm. And if you want to go deeper on any one of these systems, fodder, duckweed, azolla, or fermentation, I'll link them in the description. Let me know in the comments what video you want to see next. Your input shapes what we make next. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.